Okay. So welcome to our USC transfer panel. We're running a little bit late, but that's okay. This is, of course, hosted by our Honors Connection Club. And we're going to start off with our agenda. So we're going to start with some introductions to our USC panelists. Then we're going to have structured Q&A, open Q&A, and then some closing statements. So I'm going to hand it off to Yumna because she's our transfer panelist for today.
Awesome, thank you. So, yes, hi everyone. My name is Yumna. I'm a sophomore at USC. I am a business major, so I'm at Marshall. And then I am currently doing information systems for like computational analytics as a minor. And then, yeah.
All right. And then your expected graduation is going to be the
Mhm.
2027, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So moving on to our structured Q&A. So I'm just going to ask some questions for Yumna, and then obviously these will be recorded and uploaded on YouTube. If you have any questions, just leave them in the chat or just hold on to them until we have the open Q&A. I'm going to try to get through this relatively quickly because we only have 40 minutes. Again, I'm so sorry about that. Okay. First question is, from the schools that you were accepted to, why did you ultimately decide to attend USC?
Okay, so my transfer process was a little bit more unconventional than like a normal transferring out of CC just because I chose to apply during my first year at Community during my third semester. So I really only applied to two schools, USC and UMich, and then I was able to get into both. But then ultimately, the reason why I decided to go to USC is because I feel like I had a more like closer connection, and then I was also able to um, like I knew that I liked the location more and I didn't want to go too far away from my family. So yeah.
Yeah, those are all good reasons. Thank you. All right, our second question is, what was the most difficult aspect of the transfer process, and then how did you overcome that?
I think it was a couple different parts. It was like mentally just understanding like this is my second time applying, but if the results weren't what I wanted, having to reapply for the third time. So like especially because I applied during my first uh year at CC. I just applied a year ago, like from high school. So having gone through all of that stress and mental like processes, I guess, having to go back into that, and then going through this process, and then also like coming to like understanding that if it didn't come out, wanting to also be ready to go through the UC applications again, any other private schools that I wanted to go to. I think that was like the biggest mental hurdle. But then after that, it was just kind of focusing on like my niches, what I wanted to do and why I was really applying. Um, but yeah, I think that was all just like a challenge, but just overcoming that by like looking into your surroundings and if you really and just asking yourself why you wanted to apply.
Okay, so our next question is, what are the transfer specific resources and services that are like available to you at USC? And then does USC have like any transfer specific like advisors? And is there like transfer only housing?
Yeah, okay, so each school has their own like transfer specific resources, I guess. So USC like as a whole wouldn't really have something that they can give you for transfers. But if you go, so I was accepted into Marshall, so then Marshall hosts their own like transfer community for like the first 6 to 8 weeks of school each semester. They'll host meetings every week that you can come out to, and basically you get to meet with all the other students that also transferred in at the same semester as you, and meet people that were like upperclassmen that also transferred in. So you kind of just have like built-in friends, I guess, during that semester. And then it's up to you to kind of take that friendship and take that like networking, I guess, to your own level. The one thing that they don't have is like transfer academic advisors. But I will say that each advisor, like from each school, is equipped with all the resources for transfers or like just freshmen as a whole. Um, so they have like all the resources and the information required to help you. So I don't think there is like a need for transfer advising, I guess. And then transfer only housing is not a thing. So you don't really meet with people who are like other transfers. But because of the communities that they do like have with like the school-based community or like different clubs that do are open to like transfers, you do meet people like from similar paths as you.
Okay. Yeah, that's great that you mentioned that like you have the weekly meetings because my next question was how is the integration into like the larger community because USC is obviously a much bigger school than Foothill. Like did it feel seamless? And then do you participate in any like on-campus clubs like Greek life, anything else?
Yeah, so I think for integration into the community, I feel like this is more up to like each person. I feel like at first, during the first week, it was definitely a lot, obviously, because it's such a big community. But then it was kind of up to me to like integrate myself, start talking to people, just kind of pushing yourself out there and out of your own comfort zone. And then I guess when you talk to people, like everybody around you is very, very willing to help and also like connect with you and like kind of become friends, I guess. So I think seamless is up to whether or not you're open to putting yourself out there. And then obviously, like I was able to find a community that I'm close with, that I've become like, um, that I've found a space to call my friends, I guess. And then for like if I'm active on campus, so I have been active. I was able to join a couple different clubs. And it's both professional and like personal, like passion clubs, I guess. The one thing that was a little bit more shocking is like the USC like professional clubs are a lot more rigorous than like anything that I've seen at like Foothill or even high school, I guess. In terms of like they had their applications and you do first round interviews, they'll usually do like some sort of mixer where you come and meet everybody that passed the first round. And then you'll do second round. Sometimes there would be like case interviews, which is like very business terms, and so on and so forth. But it's definitely a lot more rigorous and daunting in that way. But something that I did learn was like once I applied and started to kind of get used to the interviews and like used to kind of talking to people and connecting with different officers from different clubs, it was definitely a lot more seamless. So if I would definitely recommend anybody like tries out the clubs, even if it's just for like the application process.
Okay, that's great. And then that does also bring me to my next question. How does the academic rigor of USC compare to Foothill?
Personally, I feel like it was definitely a challenge just because I feel like at Foothill there wasn't any like deviation from studying. It was just you're at school, you kind of study, you do your homework, you prepare for your exams, but you kind of have like your own safe space to kind of do whatever, and the clubs aren't as like rigorous and as like hands-on, I guess, if that makes sense. But then when you're at a four-year, obviously, you are A by yourself, but then you also have to push yourself for your academics and then also stay on top of your clubs to make sure that you're actually making use of like your time there. Along with that, I feel like something that I wasn't aware of was the business school at USC specifically has something called a Marshall curve. It's very similar to like the Stern curve or like the Berkeley like curves that they have. But for some of your classes in the business school, if a certain percentage of the students are ranging at like 90s or above, then they do have to curve the class down to make sure that not everybody has that. So I guess at first that was really daunting, but then as I've been in the school like long enough, I've realized it's just like how much you push yourself. And then if you like put in the effort, you can definitely like score the grade that you want.
Okay, that's good to know. So then, how was like the class size? Like, how did that affect you? And then also, like, obviously, because the class sizes would be larger, how was it like communicating and interacting with the professors?
Okay, so I think USC does a really good job of like keeping all your upper division classes or your major specific classes like to a relatively small size. It's very close to like Foothills. They cap at like 25 to 35 students. So it's pretty good with like you don't really have too many students that you're competing against in terms of like getting close to the professor, I guess. It's just up to you whether or not you want to build that connection, and like how much effort you're willing to put yourself into. For other classes like GEs, specifically, I would say that it like is very, very ranging. I only have to take two GEs, but one of my GEs is has a class size of 7 people, including me and the professor, which is like extremely small. And it's very, very tight knit. But then my second GE has like 80 students, with like a couple TAs, obviously, but the GEs definitely range like a very extremely, but for all the classes that you're going to be taking in your specific school and your specific major, it's definitely very seamless.
That's actually really nice to know. All right, we have a couple more questions. The next question is, which on-campus, so like Foothill resources, did you use or wish you used that supported you most during your application process?
Um, so something that I wasn't able to use that I wished I could was probably like the workshops and transfer um like application workshops that they did. Whether it's through like the honors community or like the honors club, just because I feel like most of them were catered towards UCs and I wasn't able to apply to UCs um, during when I was first applying. But then something that I did use was like I reached out to a couple of the people that were doing panels, like from other schools through Honors Connection Club. And I was asking them if they were able to like if they would be open to just reviewing my application with me. And then I also really utilized my professors. I reached out to anybody who was like open to reading my application, giving me like advice. Obviously, I only like took 2 to 3 professors like into account that I wanted, that I really trusted with my application and that I liked their writing skills and their writing styles, that I felt were pretty close, similar to mine. But yeah, I really used professors and then also networked from the club.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, and next question is, how does the essay pro writing process differ between a private school and a UC? In your opinion, should one approach the essays differently? I know there's like a lot of short answer questions for USC as well.
Yeah, so USC specifically, I think only had 2 questions. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure. Okay. So USC specifically had 2 questions. They had like one long common app style question, but obviously very catered towards USC, and then one like more short answered. The thing that differs the most that I feel like was challenging but also good was like USC asks like very specific questions about why me and why the school and my niche versus if I was doing an application for UCs, which I was able to look at the USC questions too. It's more generalized because you're applying to all these different campuses, and then the campuses are able to see if you fit them and then whether your like application suits their style and then you suit them. Versus like when you're applying to private schools, you really have to make sure that you're catering your application towards like what you want. Um, if you've done enough research of the school and like why you're applying, and then at the same time also like making sure that when you're doing your application, you're mentioning everything in the best way possible so that you can cater to them because you're applying to them specifically, if that makes sense. So like I had to do, I think for like a whole week, all I did was like spend time researching the campuses, um, and like finding like, so I was on like 7 different websites from the school specifically, and then like going into like very, very niche things like my major, the professors teaching in that major, what their research looks like, and things like that. So it was kind of just like a lot about what I would get out of the campus and then what the campus would get out of me while being there. So I think the thing that differs them and the thing how you guys should approach them differently if anybody is looking for advice is like if I would ever do the UC, it would be very generalized so that I can make sure that I have all of my traits listed out so that any school that is interested in me can like I guess choose me for just how I am versus if I was applying to any private school in the future, I'd probably again spend like a chunk of time just doing all the research that I could about the school and finding very like nitty-gritty things of the school that appeal to me, whether it's the clubs, the professors, their research, it's the alumni network, like anything like that. And then just mentioning all of that in the application, obviously.
All right, good to know. So was there any like specific essay question, like of the two that was like more difficult for you to answer? And then like how did you approach that?
I think the second, like the shorter one was definitely more difficult just because you only have, I think it was like 250 or 300 words, but you kind of really had to differentiate yourself because it was, I think, more about just like what have you done during the time that you last applied or your high school to now and like what are the differences, I guess, between your applications or like what have you done to change yourself. But obviously it wasn't like you can't just list out like I participated in this club or I volunteered or researched here. It really had to like be a story, but also reveal as much information about myself as I could. So I think that one took me probably like 2 to 3 weeks just to kind of have ideas laid out, and then I was able to get into the actual writing process. It was a lot of like brainstorming about how I was going to tailor my story.
And in only 350 words
Yeah.
too. Yeah. All right. Did you add any like extracurricular activities onto your application? And then what were those extracurricular activities?
Yeah, so I was obviously part of HCC, so I did that. I was also part of like the entrepreneurship, like business club, so I mentioned that. And then a lot of it was also like things I was doing outside of Foothill, because the question was also like some of the questions, the short answers that weren't like in the essays. It was the USC has this thing where it's like they'll ask you what your favorite snack is or things like that. And some of it was what have you done like outside of school to really like push yourself and propel yourself towards coming to their campus. And so I mentioned like I had a job that I was working with like a real estate agent for business operations. So I kind of connected that to my application and also mentioned that on my extracurriculars, just to kind of tie my story all together. And then I was also volunteering at like Kaiser just for like my own like passions, I guess. And then I was just actively helping out like with any of the nonprofits that are like a lot smaller, but they are for causes that I really like.
Did you submit your standardized like test scores if you took them like ACT, SAT?
I did take them, but I didn't think that they were going to tell a different story about me. Um, because I feel like my grades from Foothill were definitely enough for me to want to apply without submitting my standardized test scores.
And then what do you think made you stand out the most in your application?
Um, if it were me, I think it was probably like my essays, just because comparing them from the first time that I applied in high school to when I was rereading my application from this time, I feel like there was a stark difference, and it was all just because it was very obvious that the second time that I applied, I actually did my research into the school and like put a lot more effort into my application, because this is something that I was genuinely interested in pursuing versus when you looked at like the other essays that I was doing in high school. It was obvious that I was like applying to different campuses and it was kind of all over the place and definitely things that were like copy and pasted from several applications versus this one, since there was only two I was working on, it was a lot of just like honing in on like what I wanted from each campus and then telling my story in my own words, in my way, um, that really catered and tailored it to the school.
Okay, perfect. And then we just have a couple more questions. So, overall, what kind of like person and student like I guess do you believe USC is like a good fit for? Like, do you have to have a certain, I guess, personality for it?
I don't know if it's like a certain personality. I feel like at first when I like got there, I feel like I didn't fit like the conventional person that USC like obviously it has a stigma of like being only for one type of people and it's like party people, I guess. But after I got there, I realized that like a lot of the people are actually very rigorous and academically like very like hardworking. But there is like this notion of like work hard, play hard at the school. Um, but during the week, like you definitely really have to push yourself to make sure that you're excelling in your academics. That's the only way that you're gonna get like breaks during your weekends. Otherwise, when I first joined, I was definitely like extremely daunted by like how much homework and how much work there really was to be on top of my classes. But then I realized it was just like how much effort you're putting in during the week, and then you can relax during the weekends.
All right, and then our last question for our structured Q&A is, do you think, now that you've been there for about a semester and a half, do you think USC was the right choice for you?
I would say so. I think it was probably a good fit just because I was able to like connect with the networking, like network and alumni as well. And like my goal is to obviously be an entrepreneur and like be in the business side of things. So like the location of like LA and then the connections that the school has and offers, I think has set me up for sure. Um, but yeah, I would say it's a good bet.
All right, perfect. Okay, we're going to move on to our open Q&A. If there are any questions, please either leave them in the chat. You can message me privately if you'd like, or yeah, go ahead. And
Um,
then if there aren't any
oh, sorry.
questions, then we'll
I,
move on to the closing statements.
I did get one, so I'll just answer that one. I don't know if the question was if I'm comfortable sharing my stats. Specifically, I would say there were like I don't think I applied with my SAT and SAT scores, ACT scores. But I did have a 4.0 from Foothill when I was applying. Um, and I think that was like mainly the only thing. Oh, and then I had a 3.9 from high school that I did have to use to apply because it was my first year applying.
All right. If there's no more questions
I
at the
have actually one question for you. I think another question that a lot of transfer students have are, how did housing work for you? Like, what helped you the most? What platform or like Instagram helped you to connect with a lot of students regarding housing opportunities? Like, how did that look for you in specific?
That's a really good question. Because I obviously like going out from here, I didn't have any information about like where I could get housing, and I feel like there weren't really resources to help with that. Um, I did apply on USC's like transfer or not transfer, USC's housing portal, which is open to first years and second years. First year transfers get guaranteed housing, second years aren't guaranteed. So I was on Facebook pages, Instagram pages, just finding different people and like I was also looking at different websites for housing around the area. So apartments have like subleases and stuff. I was trying to look at everything. I was able to like kind of tour a couple different places. Eventually though, USC housing did get back to me and they were able to find a spot for me on their like apartment housing. So I ended up taking that, but it's kind of just you really have to like dig deeper into like the school and go on like deep dives with like the Facebook pages and just cold reach out to like everybody that's posting because I was able to like definitely get some options open for me, but it was really confusing because the location obviously USC's location is definitely not the best. So finding like the right area, but even the people that I was talking to from like the subleases pages and stuff, they were definitely open to tell me, even if I wasn't taking over their lease, they were able to tell me like what area I should be looking into, and different complexes that I was into if like I had a budget.
All right. Any more questions for our panelists?
Actually, something that actually ties into that. Did you use like I think like Facebook Marketplace or any like Instagram like transfer page? pages that helped you with any of your housing opportunities? Because we know that like a large, especially like a large universities that have a lot of transfer students um that like they utilize. How did that look for you?
Yeah, so there's like Facebook pages. I think it's like USC housing, USC subleases, and then just like requesting to join all of those. It's kind of like under sub pages of like USC housing, and then you just find like a bunch of them. And then there are Instagram pages that like I think students have started, where students that are going on like their semester abroad or year abroad, they'll post their like houses for subleasing. Um, and it was like they're very specific, so it's like the hub or like USC hub and things like that.
All right. Any more questions for our panelists?
I actually have one more question that I think is like a commonly asked question amongst transfer students is what do you think was your biggest overall factor that helped you kind of get into USC?
I think I feel like obviously the grades are definitely a good set, but then apart from that, obviously like I feel like during CC you have a good opportunity to like excel in your academics, but it's like with that, what else are you doing to propel yourself? So it was like tying in how I'm like pushing myself in my academics, but also trying to keep up with it with my outside activities like extracurriculars. So like when I was talking about doing that business operations internship with a real estate agent, tying that in and then projecting that, seeing like how I would use that opportunity at USC to push me forward post grad, was kind of like my main like telling story. So like tying in your experiences, and then I also mentioned like how the Connect Honors Connection Club like helped me see myself want to, I guess, transfer earlier, just because I feel like Foothill also didn't have enough academic rigor for me to want to stay for another year. So then just mentioning that.
All right. Were there any more questions?
I'm so sorry. Another question that ties in with I think what you just said. What do you think is specific at USC that you're not able to get at any other institutions or specifically at Foothill? What do you think like completely differentiates USC from all these institutions?
I think there's a couple different sides to it. Originally, I was applying as a computer science and business administration major, which is like one major at USC that I didn't see any of their other schools had that they had. There's obviously like information systems management, things like that, but that's kind of more like generalized business with like a couple like coding classes, versus this degree has like basically you're getting two degrees under one. And then on top of that, you'll still have the opportunity to do like another minor or progressive degrees in different like schools. So that was one of my biggest factors. Another one was like obviously the alumni network is very strong. And so when you have like the tag of like the school in your LinkedIn, or like when you're approaching people like during cold emails, there is definitely, and I've seen it, there is a higher chance of you getting a response from them, and also getting assistance, whether it's like advice, networking, or things like that. Um, so I would say those were like the top two, but there's definitely obviously other things that played into effect.
I actually do have a question. Do you think that like because you're a business major, do you feel like LinkedIn specifically is really helpful for you?
I think yes, LinkedIn, but then there's also something called Apollo. I don't know if anybody knows about that, but if you're a business major, I would look into it. It's like apollo.io, and it's basically where you can find people's emails for like their work emails and that are connected to LinkedIn, and then you're able to reach out to them directly like on their emails. So LinkedIn and Apollo has definitely helped me like network. Um, but yeah.
All right. Any more questions for our panelists today? All right, we're gonna move on to our closing statements. So, of course, thank you for joining us. So, follow us on Instagram. The at is right there. And then our Discord, the QR code is right there. So you can go ahead and scan it if you haven't joined already. Um, this video will, of course, be uploaded to YouTube. Um, and then Yumna, if you had any last words you wanted to share with us, maybe?
Yeah, well, obviously, if anybody sees it on YouTube and wants to reach out for any like questions, or if anybody also like wants me to look at their application, I'd be happy to help. Happy to be a resource for anybody if they see that.
Okay, thank you so much for your time today. Um, we'll s- we'll see you again soon. Best of luck at USC. Best of luck to everyone who's planning on transferring. Um, so have a good day.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you, Yumna. Bye bye. Thank you so much.